Good morning, Monday morning. We have a lot of news today. Georgia's governor is not going to allow a special session to challenge the election. We got in Arizona lawsuits headed to the Supreme Court. We are waiting for a response on the constitutional on the lawsuit in Pennsylvania about the constitutionality of mail-in voting. Just so much happening today. Video going viral showing a woman in her car screaming at the top of her lungs at a bunch of anti-lockdown protesters. But I suppose I'll just get started with probably the most pressing story. Now, of course, there's politics happening all across this country, stuff related to the election, which is increasing tensions. We're also seeing stuff related to the lockdowns, which is contributing to the tribal tensions. But now we have this. Macomb County man says he was targeted with explosives due to his politics, $10,000 reward offered for information. A man who is a prominent and well-known Trump supporter with big old Trump signs on his house. Somebody showed up and threw explosives through his window. That is top tier freaky. You know, we don't exactly know why this guy was targeted. The explosive device was what's called a mortar or artillery shell style firework. This is what we see Antifa use all the time. And I think they maybe even used it the other night because guess what? Riots are back, baby. That's right. Antifa showed up in Portland, more riots breaking out. And there's a lot of news related to conflict and chaos. And wherever these political tensions and polarization is bringing us, Antifa uses these explosives. So when I see this go off in a video around at this guy's home, you can see in his house, I guess there were two explosives thrown. One went in, one was outside. And you can see the walls are ripped to shreds. The windows were all blown out, just massive damage. And this is what Antifa does. So it seems reasonable to suggest that a guy with big old Trump flags on his house was targeted by, somebody who uses Antifa tactics, probably Antifa or some, far left extremist group. And, well, I warned this would happen. Again, I want to make sure I stress, until we know who this guy is or why he did it, I don't want to pretend like it's an Antifa versus Trump supporter thing definitively. But I will give you my personal opinion that, yeah, it is. And I've been saying something like this would happen for quite some time. They've already gone to people's homes. Now they're doing it more. There was another story. A lot of people were reticent to talk about it because there was a guy whose house was partially burned down and they wrote some like Antifa, stuff on the garage. And a lot of people were like, why would Antifa go to your house and just like write Antifa and then burn your house down? But maybe because they're dumb, because they have done things like that before. They've gone to politicians' house and spray painted dumb things. They just didn't burn the other people's house down. In that instance, where the guy's house was partially burned, it's like his garage was burned down. He had big Trump flags on his truck. There's more news, and I think it's actually way more serious. Michigan's Secretary of State says armed protesters gathered outside her home. They shouted obscenities and threatened violence in an effort to overturn the state's presidential election results, she said in a statement. Well, forgive me if I don't just completely believe the lady. There's no video or evidence of any of this happening. It may have been a small handful of people who probably weren't armed. I mean, maybe they were armed because it's Michigan and you're allowed to be or whatever. And maybe they yelled stuff. Maybe she's making it seem more dramatic than it is, or maybe she's not. Maybe it was dramatic. Maybe it was a large group of individuals. It doesn't matter. You know why? I tell you this all the time. When we see stories, NBC News, when we see stories, all right, from clickondetroit.com, these are mainstream establishment, Click on Detroit's local, NBC News clearly not. All that matters is that tribalists will say, I believe. Okay, the leftists are going to say, I knew it. These right wingers are showing up. They're going to threaten us and they're going to, it's just like that Newsweek cover. All the Trump people had torches. You don't need evidence. You just need to confirm the bias of the individual. And they'll say, I don't need proof. I'll just believe it. Well, for me, I need proof. So can I say Antifa definitively did this? No, and I won't. Can I say that there was a massive, large group of armed individuals outside this lady's house? No, because she's just saying it and he's just saying it. But I'll tell you, in my opinion, considering what's been going on, feels like we're getting to that point, doesn't it? And Trump supporters are absolutely convinced Trump ain't going nowhere. There's a bunch of viral posts talking about what Trump's been doing in the past couple of months. And I have to agree, Trump is certainly playing everything out as if he knows he's going to stay. And I've been saying that for some time. Now, listen, I've also said, as the only thing I can see is on January 20th, Joe Biden's going to be inaugurated. That's the best I can do. right? Georgia Republicans are calling for a special session to dispute the election, and the governor said no, and the governor's a Republican. Now that's crazy. You'd think he'd be like, if the legislature wants to have a session, we should bring session, especially considering he's supposed to be a Trump supporter. Nope. Honestly, I don't think it should be partisan at all. I think if a legislature says we want to convene, then the governor should convene and say, okay, but they're not going to. I think people have decided, which side they're on, what they believe to be true. And the Trump supporters are adamant. They know that Trump won. And, there's a Mark Levin the other day, probably one of the most convincing things I've actually heard is the Democracy Institute. This is a guy who was saying Democracy Institute's a polling institution. And my understanding is they're not conservative. He said that Joe Biden defied every bellwether metric. There are certain metrics that never are wrong. Never. Things like party registration, voter enthusiasm. He said anybody who looked at these metrics would have concluded they were all in favor of Trump. And there's a dozen plus or more, all these different things. How people did in the primary, the amount of press time, all of these things always indicate. He said some of these things are newer, like Google searches. I'll probably do a segment on this later, but the point is, here's a guy saying, if one of these things was wrong, people would be like, it happens. For all of them to be wrong is shocking, puzzling, and highly implausible. So what is going to happen come January 6th? I have no idea. December 14th. Okay. That's when the votes are going to be counted. But we might know as soon as tomorrow night if chaos will ensue. I don't want to get into the politics, though. I'm just bringing that up to say we have these two stories. We have riots. We've got tribal anger. And the result, I think, of any kind of dispute between Trump, Republicans, or Democrats is going to be much more of this. So let me just not rant on politics. Let's read this news because this is the bigger story of the day. And I'll have more segments on the other stuff later. But check this out. A Macomb County man said he was targeted when an explosive was thrown into his home. It literally was. There's video of it. So the homeowner said everything happened early Saturday morning, just after midnight. He was upstairs with his girlfriend when they heard a loud boom go off. He rushed downstairs and said he was shocked at what he saw. Smoke was filling the house. I went up, told her to get out of the house, grab the dog and get out of the house. That's when the homeowner said he experienced early Saturday morning after hearing not one, but two loud booms. We are not identifying him due to safety reasons. The explosion went off, and it kind of sounded like a transformer, I guess, from a power line, the homeowner said. And then another explosion went off, and it shook the house. 2 explosives thrown into his home. The explosion left a large hole in his living room floor. When we came outside, we noticed the whole window was completely blown out, smoke coming out. I didn't know if it was the house on fire or what was going on. I seen a truck racing down the road. When the police showed up, they went in. Luckily, it didn't catch fire, but the actual implosion of the mortar, it did some serious damage. The homeowner also shared a video with Local 4 of who he believes is the man who threw the explosive devices into his home and drove off. We were really scared. I mean, when you feel your house shake and explode in smoke, you don't know what's going on. But why would anybody do this? Some people say because I'm a pretty avid Trump supporter. I've always have my sign up. That's why he's offering a $10,000 reward for any information regarding what happened. I mean, it's worth it to me to find out who's trying to catch my house on fire and possibly kill me, the homeowner said. Anyone with information can contact the St. Clair Shores Police Department. Again, not entirely sure it was a leftist, but mortar explosives is a common leftist tactic. It's possible it's a false flag attack, which, if you're not familiar, is someone trying to make it seem like Antifa did this. Maybe the guy wanted insurance money or something. I don't know. Maybe he thought it was start fire. I can't speculate that far because the simple solution, Occam's razor would suggest, Trump supporter got attacked. That's about it. And it goes the other direction too. Again, I mentioned this story. There's no video. She should have filmed it. Okay. What do you want me to say? She says it happened. I'm not entirely convinced I believe it because Trump supporters don't do this stuff. But hey, here's what they say. Dozens of armed people gathered outside Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson's home over the weekend, shouting obscenities and threatening violence in an effort to overturn the presidential election results in the state, she said Sunday. Benson and her 4-year-old son had just finished decorating their home for Christmas and were about to watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas when the group arrived, she said in a statement. Actually, we just watched that last night over here. The demands made outside my home were unambiguous, loud, and threatening, she said. They targeted me in my role as Michigan chief election officer. Through threats of violence, intimidation, and bullying, the armed people outside my home and their political allies seek to undermine and silence the will and voices of every voter in the state, no matter who they voted for, she said. I don't believe you, because Trump supporters don't do this. We might start seeing more people now. I mean, we did see armed individuals go to the Michigan State House, but I'm sorry, you could have just pulled out your phone and pressed record like any other person. I mean, even the other guy where the mortar went off got surveillance footage from his neighbors showing it happening. So look, I can't tell you if it did or didn't happen. I just think it's unlikely that Trump supporters would do something like this. But maybe we're at that point. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know. I tell you, Trump supporters are adamant and they're certainly sure that Trump won. But this is bad for them, especially when they're fighting against a media establishment to legitimize their cause. This is the opposite of what they would need. So for me, I'm sorry. That's my bias. I know Antifa gets violent all the time. I've got more footage of Antifa getting violent. Okay, it's rare when you see Trump supporters go out and do something like this. Gabriel Sterling, a top Republican elections official in Georgia, said last week that President Donald Trump's repeated false claims the election was stolen from him had led to death threats, intimidation, and harassment. Saying the claims have to stop, Sterling called on Trump to step up and condemn the threats. But Trump returned to Georgia on Saturday and repeated the baseless assertions. Notice they're not saying without evidence anymore. Michigan State Board of Canvassers certified the election results for President-elect Joe Biden on November 23rd. An NBC News projection showed that he defeated Trump by more than 150,000 votes. Trump and his allies made baseless allegations about irregularities and discrepancies in Detroit vote tallies and called on the legislature to name Trump electors, despite Biden's victory. Trump and other Republicans have also filed 9 lawsuits in Michigan alleging fraud and other irregularities. As of last week, most of the suits had been withdrawn or denied. In one case, a judge described the allegations as inadmissible hearsay within hearsay. It's not baseless. Sorry. That's just not a fact. Not true. By all means, you can say there's, Trump didn't win. You can say there's widespread fraud, but it wasn't a rigged election. You can say a lot of things. The one thing you can't say is that the accusations from, I'll put it this way. When Trump says rigged election, it's not baseless. It's not. You can say we've not proven to have been a rigged election, but we certainly have enough evidence to call into question the integrity of the election. And therein lies the very serious problem. These media outlets, why should I trust this happened when they lie in the story? Now, okay, baseless. Are they lying when they say that? Not necessarily, but it is an opinion. Okay, is this a news story or an opinion piece? Let me tell you how a news story should actually read. It should say, dozens of armed people gathered outside Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson's home over the weekend, shouting obscenities she alleged Sunday. Then, when talking about the repeated claims, it should say, Gabriel Sterling, a top Republican elections official in Georgia, said last week that President Donald Trump's claims that election was stolen from him have led to death threats. That's what he said, and those are Trump's claims. Adding, repeated false. Okay, that's not true. That's just not true. Some of the things Trump has claimed you can probably say are false, but that's a misframing. We have to make sure that when we're talking about the totality of what Trump is talking about, it's just his claims. When it goes on to say repeated baseless assertions, it should read, but Trump returned to Georgia on Saturday and once again and repeated his allegations of widespread irregularity and fraud. That's it. Baseless is an opinion. That's what news has become. That's where we are now. Well, the clashes are heating up. Video shows Trump supporters and counter-protesters in violent clash in Washington state. This from just yesterday morning. And I tell you, man, Antifa got stomped out. Woo! It was bad. And these people, they're like old dudes. It's like people in their 50s, 60s. Like there's one old guy there. And they did not. I mean, they stomped out these Antifa guys, man. There was ground and pounds where they're just sitting on top of the guy wailing on him. There's people being just battered with clubs. It reminds me kind of V for Vendetta. You know that scene where I don't know if you've seen the movie where they're talking about how everything's going to play out, and then the researcher says eventually someone's going to do something stupid, and then all of a sudden it shows all these residents just surrounding a cop and then start beating the crap out of him. It reminds me of that because Antifa, they don't live in these areas. They come from cities. They go into suburbs. They go into these communities. Where they don't live, and they pick fights and they smash and they destroy. They did it in the western suburbs of Chicago for some reason. These people came into small towns where I have friends and family and started trashing things. And that was back in June, and it freaked out some of my friends and family members. They're like, why are they coming here? What are they doing? They're like, there's not even there's one small town, didn't even have any cops. There was a sheriff. The sheriff's department is it was like 2,000 people. They showed up anyway and made sure their presence was known. Local residents are saying enough, and they're coming out and they're starting to push back. And that's my big concern. I don't know if this is worse than it's ever been. I guess throwing an explosive through someone's window and showing up armed to a politician's house is about as bad as it's gotten in a long time in terms of where these conflicts are starting to arise. We've seen protests, okay? I'll put it this way. We've seen leftist protests march through neighborhoods and then hassle homeowners. In Portland, they went to a guy's house because he had an American flag on his porch, and they demanded he remove it. Otherwise, they would burn his house down. So when you tell me the Antifa showed up at someone's house and tried to burn it down or blow it up, I say, sounds about right. There have not been widespread instances where Trump supporters have showed up to politicians' house screaming and waving guns around, but it could happen. And I think there may be one or two circumstances like this. I mean, we certainly had Laura Loomer went to Nancy Pelosi's house, but that was a protest over like immigration and the wall and stuff. So that was like not even in the same ballpark. I think conservatives are much less likely to be active in any capacity. That's true. And that means that often conservatives will not stand up for themselves, not fight back, and the left will fight. It's not even about fighting back. Antifa goes out and beats people. They start the fights. And often conservatives just say, I don't want to be involved. Because you know what I think? I think the conservatives are just mostly regular people working their job, staying home, maybe watching Fox News sometimes. Not anymore, I guess, or complaining on the internet. Antifa, they're the extremists. The progressives are extremists. They're organized. They know how to get power. You have staunch conservatives on the right, but they've really lost a lot of their power. We had the moral authoritarians of the 90s. I had people come over to my place, periodically, and I've got a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards. Trust me, this is relevant. I got a bunch of Magic the Gathering cards in a glass case. Some of them are just valuable. Some of them have been banned from the game. It's a card game for those who aren't familiar. Banned from the game because they're just too good. But many have been banned due to moral authoritarianism, and that's why I have them in there. A couple of the cards, as of recent history, were banned because they were deemed racist. But one card had its art changed in, I believe it was in the 90s, because it was the moral authoritarian right-wingers who demanded it. It's an image of a man, and there's a pentagram burning behind him. Religious Christian group said it was satanic and unacceptable for children, so the game was sort of forced to remove that art. And the updated art no longer has. So we have the side-by-side. You can see the new art and the old art. I have that in there to make the point, to show it, in the 90s, it was the right, the moral authoritarians, putting labels on music and banning art. It's not anymore. The organizational power of the right has waned substantially. It may be coming back now under Donald Trump. The Republican Party is completely weak and pathetic. And these Republicans, man, they have a tendency to drop to their knees and lick the boots of the Democrats. It's the funniest thing. I tell you. I'll tell you this. Why I don't like Democrats for the most part. They are psychotic moral authoritarians, at least for now. I didn't like the Republicans when they were doing it, so I grew up thinking the Republicans were really bad. But where are the Republicans now? They are spineless little Weasley dudes for the most part. A lot of women got elected recently, but those tend to be populist, stronger women. You got Lauren Boebert. She's the opposite. She's carrying a gun around with her, and she's yelling at politicians. That's the exact opposite. That's the new Republican Party. Those are the Republicans I actually respect. But for the most part, you have these rhino, establishment political Republicans who are like, oh, geez, the Democrats will think I'm not cool. I better just give them whatever they want. And they roll over and they expose their bellies like spineless little Weasley people. You take a look at what's going on in Georgia. The state legislature, good for them, said they want to hold a special session. Well, okay, I mean, if that's what they want to do, right? And the governor said no. Why? Why is this governor fighting so hard to prevent any kind of accountability here? It's the stupidest and most pathetic thing I have ever seen. It is not on him. He should say, listen, there's a state legislature. They have asked to convene. They want to hear the evidence. So be it. It's the right thing to do. We should be able. So in Georgia, what happened was they can't find the chain of custody documents for absentee ballots. There you go. That's we better convene. No. Yeah, because the Republican Party is a bunch of weak, scared, timid, spineless losers for the most part. Now, recently, there's been a wave of new Republicans coming into the House and a couple in the Senate who are anything but that. And so my respect. On the Democratic side, they certainly have spines enough to literally defend and support overt terrorism. I'm not even kidding. Like Kamala Harris soliciting donations for the rioters who are targeting people and burning down their businesses for political reasons. Wow, you got to give it to her, man. That takes a spine, no doubt. The Republicans? Yeah, right. They could. They what can they do? Look, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, they've been pretty vocal. Matt Gaetz definitely. Thomas Massey. You've got a good amount, right? And you got the new Republicans coming in. So I'm not trying to say literally every single one, just too many. You got a lot of spineless Democrats too. Don't get me wrong, but the Democrats tend to be these shrieking banshee-like authoritarians. Look at Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has been on a 4-year temper tantrum, just screaming and pounding the table. Orange man! That's all she's been doing. Trump has certainly pounded the table quite a bit on his own, having his version of a temper tantrum. But to be fair, it's because they had a temper tantrum over his winning, and Trump has been fighting to do what he wants, to get his job done. Build the wall, secure the borders, tariffs, all of these things. And he's had to contend with whiny baby Pelosi pounding on the walls and screaming like a pathetic little feckless child. And even the other Democrats are fed up with it. It's just absolutely pathetic what Pelosi's been doing. And Schumer and Nadler. And yes, they're like, Tim, why won't you talk about Mitch McConnell? Let me tell you, Mitch McConnell, I think, is awful. But he certainly got the Republicans what they wanted with over 200 federal judges and 3 Supreme Court justices. So they got that done. Everything else, they've just been blocking legislation. And I don't like McConnell at all. I don't like Lindsey Graham, especially Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is like the definite, you ever see Nightmare Before Christmas and the mayor's head spins around and it's a different face? Yeah, there you go. Lindsey Graham. He's like, I think Donald Trump should fight tooth and nail for this. And then as soon as he walks away, he walks over and fist bumps Kamala Harris and pats her on the back and scuttles off. Yeah, okay, dude. I actually think that you care about any of this. I'm sick of establishment politics. But there is an inherent problem there. When you have a bunch of spineless Weasley politicians that just want the keys to the castle, they don't want to fight. So that means they usually just roll over for each other and say, I don't want to fight. Now you got a bunch of screeching, angry, moral authoritarians on the left. You got Donald Trump, and that's a battle. And it's just escalating. It's going to get worse. And then you see it reach the ground level. In Florida, I think it was last week or a couple days ago, a bunch of the players, a couple players for one team waved a Blue Lives Matter flag and ran on the field. So the other team came out and all took a knee for the national anthem. Then they all run into the field, start beating the crap out of each other at some point. And I'm telling you, when the violence reaches the regular citizen level, like a high school football team, and it goes all the way to the top with the current presidential election, doesn't it feel like the fissure is complete? There are now 2 disparate realities in this country. Seems like it to me. Hope that guy whose house was bombed is okay. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.